Hello and welcome back to my workshop for episode 2 of Smoke Pulse programs. In episode 1 we looked at how to make the Smoke Pulse programs to give you any pulsing sequence that you want, and the output of that was simple on or off. So it would go from fully off to fully on, in other words a servo output value of -100 to +100%. Now, I don't have smoke pumps, but those who do tell me that they like a variable output value because if you're at partial throttle, you don't want the pump running at full speed. You need to vary the speed of the pump. And from discussions I've had with other people in the past, there are a variety of smoke pumps have different characteristics. Some need 0% or anything negative will switch the pump off. In other words, it only works in the +% outputs, and some pumps need you to come back to -100% to be off, so they work across the full range. Okay, so how do we adapt the programming that we showed in episode 1 to cope with a variable output? Well, you could, for instance, in the sequencers, simply program the on value not to be +100 but to be plus some other figure like +60%. But this still gives you a fixed value. It's not going to be variable, so again it may only suit one particular throttle setting. What we need is something that you can actually vary whilst the pulsing is going on. And there's a couple of ways we can do that, and we'll look at them. One is straightforward. Your smoke pump output will vary with the throttle, so it would be at +100 when the throttle is fully open and at a lower value somewhere lower down on the throttle. And we'll also look at a different way that we can put it onto one of the rotary knobs. In this case we'll use P8 because you may want to be able to experiment with pump settings independent of the throttle. So we'll look at how we can use that pulsing sequence along with variable outputs. Now, the obvious thing to use is a mixer because we want to mix the throttle, or the P8, into the pump. And we could use the pulsing program we've already set up simply to switch the mixer on or off. So far, so good. But there's a snag. When you switch a mixer off, the output, I would say it goes to 0. It becomes nothing, but in effect it goes to 0%. Think about it. If you have an aileron to rudder mixer and you switch the mixer off, you don't want the output, i.e. to the rudder, to go hard over to one side, to -100%. You want it to have no effect. It goes to 0. And if our output from the mixer to the pump goes to 0 at off, then some pumps that use 0 as off would switch off, but other pumps that use -100 as the off would still be running at half power. So we need to find a way to force a mixer output to go to -100% when it's off. And this may be useful as well if your pump uses 0 as the off, because if its programming is just on the edge and 0% just keeps it trickling over at a very low speed, you want it to go into a negative number. So forcing it to -100 will work for all of them. Okay, let's see how we get on. We've got the same model memory as episode 1 with all the pulsing set up for that. So let's first of all look at using variable pump output with the throttle. We'll come off into menu, into fine tuning, free mixes, add a mixer from throttle. It'd be an asymmetric mix with the throttle, smoke, master value, advanced. Master value will make that 100%, and the switch is going to be the pulsing logic switch. So we go into there, plus logic switch. If you remember, we set up 2 that's the logic switch that just has the single sequence from the 3-position switch. Logic switch 2 has both the 3-position and the 2-position switch, so we might as well use that one for the moment, demonstrate everything. Say OK to that. And we'll say OK here. Let's come out back to the function assignment. Now we don't want the smoke output controlled anymore by the logic switch because we're setting up the mixer to run it. So we go in there, clear that out, say OK, OK there. And we can OK out of this. And if we come back here, let's look at the servo output for the pump. It's servo number 5, and there's what I told you. When it's off, it's going to go to 0%. So in a moment, we'll look at how to force that back to -100. But in the meantime, let's switch on a sequence and see that what we've done so far works. So I'll switch on the simple 2-second on, 2-second off sequence. We have to open the throttle a bit. There we go. So now you can see that it's coming up to a variable amount. I'll open the throttle a bit further. There you are. So now our pulsing can be proportional to that. Right. Let's switch that off. Say OK there. Come back to the fine tuning. Back to the free mixes. And we're going to add another mix. And we're going to mix the smoke to itself. Into here. The value will be, once again, 100%. Now, we're going for not a standard curve, but a constant curve. And we're going to move that constant curve down to -100%. Say OK to that. And very importantly, the switch that will switch this on is when the pulsing from the smoke pump sequencing goes off. So that's going to be logic switch 2, but reversed. So we don't want it to activate when the pump's trying to run. We want it when the logic switch says switch the pump off. Do that. Say OK. Say OK to that. Okay, let's back out of there. Have a look at the servo. There we are. Now -100%. Okay, let's switch the sequencing on. There you see, it's varying now between -100% and some value from the throttle. And if I switch that sequence off, we can have the other sequence that we used. And I can open the throttle and give you different values. Okay. Working nicely. Oops daisy. Switch that off. Well, there we are. That solved that one. What about, though, if you wanted to use P8, the tuning knob here, instead of the throttle? Set that independently. Okay, let's come out of there. What we need to do is create a new function for that. So we come down to Functions Assignment, create a new function. I won't type the whole thing to save you time watching it, but we'll call it S for smoke and P for proportional. Okay, and it's going to be on P8 tuning knob. There we go. Okay to that. Okay, and we can come out of there, go back to fine tuning, down to our free mixes, and instead of throttle to smoke, it's going to be SP to smoke. And we'll need to edit it, I think, because we want the curve to go not from minus 100 to plus 100, or do we? Yes, we do want the curve to go that way. If you have a pump that's going to minus 100 up to plus 100 as its full range, then you'd leave the curve as it is. If your pump runs from 0 up to 100, then change it to a 3-pointer and just run it from the midpoint there up to the end point. Okay, let's have a look now then at the servo, shall we? Yes. Well, consider what's in, yep, okay. Okay, the pulsing is off. Let's switch the pulsing on. There we go. And I can, when it's switched on, I can vary the number with the P8 knob. So to any value that we want. And there, that's how you can do it. So you can have your sequencing and a variable pump value as well. But if needs be, force it back to minus 100 to switch it off.